Hello, people of Wethersfield, Connecticut, intercities, Connecticut, and interbranch. There are federal and intercities, interstates, state police families, for example, with the Wethersfield police chiefs retired, involved with organized crime acts on my streets with people from other areas. Since I was a kid, I recorded them increasingly involved with all kinds of natures of organized crime, black people. See, these are some black KKK, Latino themed, Italian themed, Korean themed, at the same time, timed collusions with more, and overt criminal enterprises, private ones. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. He's involved with a Ruth, for example, who associated with retired mayors from Wethersfield next to the Board of Education. Involved also with people named DeMorrow, like a John DeMorrow with Old Wethersfield. Involved further with criminal enterprises, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, including a principal that was forced. Now, the courts have roles preventing writing and switching and forging names to a whole bunch of people that work at New Britain Superior Court and Hartford Courts and Connecticut's District Court. Involved also with predicate acts with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices. Involved with criminal enterprises at kids' campuses and between campuses, including roles of predicate acts methods where they have kids from private schools involved with identity thefts into databases with kids from the same public schools that don't even know each other. And that is consciously exploited through time. In other words, when they treat things like leaking, they're doing it to measure and maintain the cover-ups of themselves having been used that's one of the topics controlling the news topics in the news. They have World Trade Center predicate acts that Wethersfield has roles with, on and off the state judicial branch office, on and off state corrections offices, a bunch of people tied to a Potter family as victims / hyper victims. They're being used to repeat things as victim predators, hyper predators. A whole bunch of people tied in with the state judicial branch offices. People I never had a verbal conversation with at all personally, including my teachers. This is also how there are things hyper evidentially recorded relative to how people have been using the words evidence, including judges and prosecutors, at the same time with a whole bunch of different countries, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, using predicate acts with facts roles, styles, needs, and natures. So there were also probation officers from that used the Wethersfield town offices through time, involved with ones intercities, involved with some murders, and confessions from connected strangers intercities. And then with the people that were planting evidence on my street, untimely death rolls at Trinity College, and with ones years ago in my area, with some of the people who made timed confessions relative to that, and another untimely death, like a Robert Rodriguez, who brought up the principal's child abuser's campus to me. And they made people make a whole bunch of statements and confessions to me and say things that were totally lies. I never even got to talk. And then when they called back and left a whole bunch of messages with more the same. And with for example, to show the whole wire crime acts methods, federal evidences crimes methods. They prevent people from talking and then use the truth for a lie, that there was a whole bunch of phone conversations, how could there be no communications? They also do this at the Wethersfield Police Department. There are people with the name Mendez involved with other police forms and how they train the kids, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, with the names next to the schools too, also involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders through time. Whiting forensics has roles with state police families and with digital crimes with a Joshua Julian, also with the Facebook pages of the Wethersfield Police and of the New Britain Superior Court. And of the campuses, further involved with various natures of federal criminals and predicate acts involved, including sexual and medical. New Britain Superior Court has rape threats with a whole bunch of people tied to the house /S near me and people from other areas that were planting evidence on all sides of my house. And that's recorded. Robert Rodriguez confirmed on Facebook what he said about the untimely death. And I don't even know him. He said it to me near my house to make it look like he knew me. In other words, and I didn't even respond. I didn't say nothing to him the first or second time. He tried to plant evidences there with other people. That was time collusion / S with other people, including people involved with home break-ins like DeMoro. People like they named DeMoro had a girlfriend also involved with other people with home break-ins in the area because they have intelligence roles with the families along Church Street, for example, with the courts and prosecutors with child abusers, leaders of kids years apart, where they had timed roles with forcing that. And that is inseparable from their syntax with the building of the schools. We just need to make additions too. And the designs of the schools, they're the ones messing it up, pretending like the difference, they're being led by problems rather than what is true always, proper. Our founders communicated about Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens House, tactically ulterior from how we are being forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to entertain it, being and having been taught. Slavery was entrenched in northern colonies, southern colonies, for example, and crazy laws against every single people. And why and how there is a witch trials place next to Webb House, again, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. And how and why. It's considered a museum while they have other communicated for what our founders. George Washington was using James Madison's plan and the leverage of the founders behind him, plural, where they were forcing the other natures of founders to break the laws. You know, and to an extent, everyone's syntax was already locked, collusion / S against everyone else to an extent, and everyone pretending otherwise that body would be sensed, including as a majority of people, including if as everyone, and that would be countered. There were more than 13 colonies entrenched in America before America's founders were even born. And themselves, they were divided. And their countries, they were the possessions of. They were the possessions of the breaching method too. That came from since before modern religious messengers. Clear as day, we had criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, fact, achieving nature, quality, aspects in nature. Speaking as the names of the people of the sciences, all exceptions in exception nature that appear to be a demonstration of other, they come with demonstrations of the same thing because it was a breaching method involved. This is not to blame. This is to blame the breaching method. Forgiveness is because if people make guilt, leaving out the breaching method that reassign what black people's whites of eyes communicate, for example. People leave that out. That's exactly what the breaching method wanted and needs. People to blame white and call that science. Use the truths for lies. They were white. They were Irish slaves. This is specifically to keep differences racketeering. This breaching method reassigned black people's whites of eyes communications to measure and maintain styles, needs, and natures that can't defend that and afford to have discerned the value actual of people with short words proper regarding predicate acts with facts. That's another thing that this is about. So Wethersfield police have been forging and switching names with the courts, involved also with federal agencies. Through time since before I was a kid, there are proofs that whiting forensics has been involved with all kinds of natures of crime scenes through as a certain type of victim / hyper victim, also tactically delusions wrought. As like with Joshua Julian. Joshua Julian is one of the ones involved with a whole bunch of people directly and indirectly involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, and his co-defendants and their family members and their neighbors are increasingly involved with predicate acts into databases at campuses with people directly and indirectly involved with them. And these are people involved with further World Trade Center predicate acts and refusing to identify. The same ones involved with World Trade Center predicate acts had further roles with worse child abuses of kids than the principal upskirt nature is put in jail for. And while they were forcing that with him too, involved with other natures of organized crimes with the kids and with people on Knott Street, for example, people on Church Street, people next to schools in town through time, as one's involved with a whole bunch of false flag police force. Wethersfield police attached me to a fake conversation with them as I never went there down there at all as a kid. They pretended I had conversations with them as a kid. And the kids who did go down there to speak with them when they wanted me to go down there, those kids gave affidavits that they were attached to fake and changed communications and collusion/S with overt criminal enterprises and private ones and various natures of federal criminals in one sense before they were caught, who had time collusion/S increasingly with retired police chiefs and their intimate ties and families and people associated with them in my area, involved also with other police departments of Connecticut, involved with wire crime acts and methods with them. They put fake transcripts with the phones, and now these are people pretending they could have sense and sensibilities proper regarding, calm language regarding this, let alone regarding aggressive language with this. So they have the difference of the news. WFSB, Connecticut Channel 3 News, have me in paid conversations with them. They have people involved with Rocky Hill campuses and Harper campuses next to them, involved as the ones with predicate acts on my street, directly and indirectly involved with them, sequence ships, their campuses, the family members of their campuses. Everyone's, as one's involved with the World Trade Center attack too. Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, is increasingly involved with names on and off the state corrections offices, like DeMorrow and Calola, with predicate acts on my street, with the police forms switching and forging names. And with people that DeMorrow and Calola, they have cousins named Scalora. Scalora are one of the ones involved with the Saudi attackers, with people at the World Trade Center next to it, in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center in Manhattan, right before it. Names on both sides of that case, and the court itself has roles with sequence ships with names involved with predicate acts against me. Also themselves not even knowing, they know it's plausible, but everyone's been attached to fake and changed communications with me since I was a kid. Is also as hyper evidential. We have natures of investigations, investigators that and courts that needed to pretend they didn't realize. They have Sandy Hook campuses, including a prison there, was and is increasingly timed collusion/S with various natures of crime scenes and names next to them, and the reported killers and various natures of criminals associated with the name Cintron, involved also with the police chief Cintron and his intimate ties, and his family's intimate ties. Like, everyone forced to speak to others too, make it sound like I know them. Like a Jessica Cintron, I was never in the presence of a Jessica Cintron for a moment in my life. I don't know her. She's reportedly the daughter of a principal Cintron, and they have their kids involved. Also with the Leahy family that faked conversations with me as doctors, ones with badges and gavels, various courts, and prosecutors personally and professionally involved with them, with stacking predicate acts into databases and then acting tied to those predicate acts. No. So please, Judge Napolitano, say sorry to him, because you guys have next to Fox Connecticut News is a whole bunch of people involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with people on off Two-Rod Highway and where it runs into Hang Dog Lane in Wethersfield. There are increasingly people that are strangers that I don't know at all, and ones that sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm they have roles of predicate acts, identity thefts and frauds, federal evidence is planting with former mayors and with their family members, like a former Mayor Gold and his family members, increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and putting little tricks, fake ties to people, fake natures of ties to people that are pretended by that into databases, involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids years apart. They also have collusion/S with the families next to medical campuses, plural. There are proofs just for how they are involved with names next to Hartford Hospital, like the Morals Market through time. I don't believe it's there anymore. I believe it's in Rocky Hill now. That spot too is involved with Paul DeMorrow with war crime acts and methods with the police departments and their families involved. In the form too, where they just put fake and change transcripts. You guys have investigators themselves of all ages and of all natures, and involvements with all ages consciously, where this breaching method is multi-front, sickly distinctly against each age of fact-cheating nature. That's why and how the suburbs are manifest the way they are, even though they were designed for a torture, extortion, fact-cheating nature slavery method that had already been entrenched sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies that were not entirely the possession of England, and England didn't have possession of itself. That's why one of the reasons why how they don't remember the history of English properly. I have an algebra class teacher that repeated sexual things about the sexual and intimate ties to one of my neighbors, and about how they're Jewish, and a Mike Demain and Adam Demain and their families involved with a bunch of intelligence families next to Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut, who also had roles with there were 4 people. There were 3 people besides me in my algebra class when I was a sophomore in high school. There are increasingly cover-ups of people I recorded from public schools, from private schools, involved with predicate acts at my campuses, identity theft, fraud, slanders. Increasingly, since I was a kid, people have been attaching me to faked and changed communications with everyone around me, including my family. And I can't get them onto paper. This is a breaching method that keeps criminal insidiousness natures of positive and negative treatment styles, blaming other things others are for ourselves. Like for what caused the black people's white survive. You're only incapable now of it. And you guys are changing and faking what people say. You're preventing us short words proper and pretending others simultaneously. That's what's recorded. That's why I need you to get on paper. I want a response to the letter I wrote to the Wethersfield police. They did not respond because they already, before that, attached me to fake letters and changed communications, including digital. There's an officer Poison involved with Hotmail, taking and with their motivation, taking people's Hotmail away. Not honestly, with an officer Poison, further involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids. Here and with the courts, I want them on paper now because that's all obligated. I can't. In other words, we have people involved with violence on my street. You know, in other words, from other areas, and in other words, intercities they have these crime methods, and we're going to examine their methods. But in other words, that's what you guys want to take one topic at a time. Let's take the important ones. Let's take where you guys hid and had hid from you. You have more medical offenders of kids, foreign and domestic, with their own kids involved with adults, putting little magic tricks in databases, and collusions with prosecutors and judges, stacking predicate acts with facts, collusion /s into their databases. They're only capable of it. Speaking as their value as what it is not, speaking of the branches of government. They are not free at last. They are not unabridged. Get them on paper. I'll show you how to get them unabridged. Vaccines.